drone industry will be 10 times bigger than what anybody expects.
Modern warfare is uncovering a new weapons race across the globe.
The one thing about warfare in particular, the side that controls the airspace really controls what's happening tactically on the ground.
It's why President Trump just issued an executive order to boost America's spending on drone development, and why military insiders are helping to lead the charge.
We have the former Secretary of Defense of the United States. We have the former Secretary of the Navy of the United States. Folks like this don't join small cap boards unless they really know.
Cameron Chell with Draganfly Drones, North America's longest standing drone company, joins us for an inside look about the explosive growth about to hit this entire industry.
I think us and probably likely a few others are maybe even just months away from market appreciation that's, spectacular. .com based spectacular.
How you can profit from this growing investment in drones. Let's dive in. Cameron, thank you so much for being here today to really share your expertise on what's going on with the drone industry and defense. There seems to be an arms race happening across the globe right now as conflicts and tensions are rising all over. And this is where it seems like most of the investment in the current warfare arms race is, and that's drones. Talk about what you're seeing in the industry as far as more and more countries investing in drone technology.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. I appreciate it, and I'm honored to be here. So, listen, drones have been around. Draganfly has been in business for 25 years. We're, at least to my knowledge, we're the oldest drone manufacturer in the world, certainly on a commercial basis. And we've been doing search and rescue, police, and military contracting for that entire time. And so we've seen, waves of, kind of interest around drones and how they can be used and such. But certainly since the advent of Ukraine, it's become very, very applicable in terms of what drones are capable of. The one thing about warfare in particular, the side that controls the airspace, really controls what's happening tactically on the ground. So you've got very large nations that have typically put up multi-billion-dollar types of infrastructure, plane, manned aircraft, satellite communication, et cetera, in order to have air dominance. But today, in a relatively small area, let's call it a few square kilometers, you put up 5 or 6 drones, which can be at a fraction of the cost of aircraft and sophisticated infrastructure, and you can create air dominance. So anything from 5,000 feet down now is really about air dominance with drones. So from a very strategic level, drones are playing maybe the most important role within theater right now, within the theater of conflict. Now you've got drones that can do everything from very precision surveillance right through to very precision ordnance delivery to very precision logistics delivery, all at a fraction of the cost. So it's game changing, and it can be done in a way where and what we've seen in Ukraine is more and more as time goes on, the conflict is happening between equipment or between drones, right? As opposed to, masses of people running out of trenches.
Yeah, I think that's why we're seeing so much investment into drones right now, Cameron. I'm seeing President Trump just issuing an executive order, actually in early June here, saying we want to invest in the U.S. more in drones and developing new drones. And I know that's exactly what your company does. But is the U.S. just one of many countries right now that are really turning their attention to investing their military dollars into drones and developing drones?
Yeah, we're definitely seeing this on a global basis. Critical equipment in the military, you manufacture domestically. So whether it's your aircraft or because you've got to protect that supply chain so that if you get into a conflict that you're not dependent on potentially on a foreign adversary that's providing part of your parts or your supply chain logistics or such in order to deliver that equipment. Now, because drones are becoming so critical in the overall strategy and tactics, they need to be developed internally within a particular country. So we see the United States, investing incredibly heavily now, or they're starting to. It's one of those critical components that has to be owned by a particular nation for its own sovereignty and security. But along that same lines, we're seeing that exact same thing happening because within all the other countries. Now, typically, or somewhat typically, you've seen the Five Eyes nations or the NATO countries, rely on each other, and in particular, rely on the United States in order to provide a lot of that equipment. But candidly, because of, the current trade position that the administration has, which, it has lots of other valid reasons or such to be in place, we see these countries now going, wait a minute, we've got to have our own drone programs, protect our own supply chain as well. Now, the added advantage of drones is that they're not billion-dollar, programs. These are drones and units that can be put in place at a fraction of that type of cost, so they can also afford to be investing into these types of programs. So you've kind of now got these 3 or 4 reasons that are really starting to drive drone initiation, drone innovation, and drone deployment. I've been in the business for too long. And the reality is what's happening in the drone space and the capabilities that are being brought to the table have taken a lot longer than one would think, but it's going to be about 10 times bigger than what people expect. So very similar to the internet back when they're like, why do I need a web page? I'm in the yellow pages kind of attitude. It's kind of gone from that where, if everything, absolutely everything revolves around the internet, in business, let's say, and even within our personal lives. And I think within things like public safety, law enforcement, infrastructure management, lots of different industrial sectors, and certainly in the military, it's taken a bit longer to get there, but now it's moving rapidly, and it will be 10 times, it's so deeply integrated into everything that is done. Every operation will involve drones, every operation.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point that drones, this is not new technology. It's been around for decades, but it's finally starting to get to that implementation phase. And I think another part of that is that we're seeing how effective it is. Like you said, the Ukraine war really put on the spotlight how effective drones can be in a warfare situation, in a conflict situation. There was one stat of the Ukraine having a few $100,000 of drones that caused billions in damage to Russian equipment simply by a few relatively inexpensive drones. And so that effectiveness is what we're continuing to see more and more countries seeing. This is the warfare of the future. But as you said, that also means more development. I think at any time we see a conflict and we see something successful, then there's going to be counter efforts and things like that, and just new technology. So what are you seeing as far as new technology and developments? And is that a big part of your business right now?
Yeah, so actually the biggest part of the technology development, the more experience that operators get using drones, the more creative they get using drones. We saw drones initially being used just for surveillance. Hey, let's find out where the enemy is. And then that kind of said, hey, we could put lasers on these and use them to laser targets so our artillery is more effective. And then that turned into, hey, why can't we strap a grenade on this thing and fly it somewhere and with precision? The most current example is the incredible innovation that the Ukrainians used to take out 40% of the strategic bombing capability that Russia had using, literally, $1,000 drones. Now, the technology that was involved with those FPVs was actually quite sophisticated, but it was incredibly inexpensive to implement. But it was technology that nonetheless that wasn't able to be applied previously because you didn't have a platform, being a small drone aerial device, they could get deep into enemy territory like that. I actually think the most exciting things happening in the drone space are actually people discovering all the new concepts of operations that they can put forward. That said, if we look at, say, like the Draganfly or Apex drone, it's now fully integrated for NVIDIA chips. So we're seeing AI at what they call the edge. We're seeing onboard processing actually with the drone. So these drones are becoming smarter and smarter, with less and less human intervention required to carry out very, very sophisticated and capable missions. And again, at a fraction of the cost. So the introduction of AI into this already incredibly disruptive platform is definitely the next level of what's unfolding.
That is exciting and also a little terrifying to think about, and all of the developments happening in there. I think about other investments that might come with the developments of drone into cybersecurity measures and other things like that as part of this. Can you share some other sectors that might also be getting more and new investments as drones continue to develop and become really integrated into warfare?
The thing about drones is they end up performing a few different functions, either collecting data and delivering something. That's really the two things they do. And nothing can collect data better than a drone. So certainly for things like public safety, infrastructure building, infrastructure management, wildlife management, wildfire management, the list just absolutely goes on and on in terms of the applications. Now, you couple that on top of what's happening in the military, the additional data that you're collecting. So you might be flying a mission, which might be a tactical mission, but at the same time, you're collecting all kinds of data. What frequencies are the enemy combatants using? What communications are going on? What's the air quality in the space? You might be mapping your LiDAR at the same time. So you're actually mapping the entire battlefield that you're flying over down to the millimeter, not when the next satellite flies over, but you might have 50 or 500 drones flying in an area, all mapping, and they might be flying 4 missions or 5 missions a day or hundreds of missions a day. So you're getting up-to-date, real-time mapping of topography, of troop movements. It just completely changes how warfare will be conducted. But not just warfare. And this is why I say the drone industry will be 10 times bigger than what anybody expects, because you're looking at the types of data that was never actually feasibly on an economic basis recordable or collectible before. And now you layer in AI on top of it. Now we're getting data that we've never had before. And when you've got data and information and metrics that you've never had before, everything starts to change.
Now that stat is interesting, 10 times bigger than anyone expects. And so I want to talk a little bit more about the growth that you're already starting to see, as this is kind of just the beginning of this growth that you're expecting in the drone industry. But let's talk about your sales specifically at Draganfly. What are you seeing as far as orders coming in, growth in the last few quarters? What does your business show about just the growth in this sector?
Yeah, I think it's really important to note, building a drone is like building an aircraft. And so a lot of companies have tried to be in the drone space. In fact, every North American company, except for the last 5-6 years, every North American company other than Draganfly that has gone into the drone space has gone out of business. And it's because it's a very difficult business. People think that, they can go on the internet and, order a drone kit and they can put it up in the air and hey, building a drone is easy. But when you start talking about putting drones over populated space, dealing with the FAA, now you're into the aircraft manufacturing space. So from a regulatory perspective, it's incredibly, incredibly important. And then you've got a whole bunch of buyers, in fact, the entire market, that's really just kind of starting to learn how to use drones. So you've got all the training of their people, that they understand how to operate them, how does it fit into their concept of operations. So it's taken quite some time for the drone industry from a regulatory standpoint and from a manufacturing capacity standpoint to even be able to accept those orders. So if we look at the market today, there's kind of 3 or 4 North American players who, for the first time in my career, I'm saying those are going to be the 3 or 4 players that are going to be the players long term. Previous to that, I've always had a bit of an attitude of like, they're all going to go away because they're all scaling too fast. They all don't really understand the industry. We see these big numbers, but that market just wasn't really there. Well, now we see those orders starting to come. So we internally can organically build about $100 million worth of product per year now. But you've had to build that capacity up front before you can even get the order. So somebody like a military or a tier 1 commercial customer isn't going to make an order for you for $5 million or $10 million or $20 million unless they know that you can deliver on it, in particular, the military or public safety. So we now see the maturing on the North American side, or 3 or 4, maybe 5 players at most, that can actually start to meet that capacity. None of those companies are really competing with each other. Very simply because the market is so vast and so much coming in. I can say with 100% confidence, we do not have one competitive bid out there right now. There are dozens and dozens of companies coming into the space now in North America. It's going to take them years to get to that spot. You have to have thousands of hours on your airframes, thousands of hours on your motors, thousands of hours on your software, and then you've got to have $100 million worth of capability to actually manufacture. So while these 3 or 4 companies are really quite small, they are all poised and have paid the price to become, the industry leaders going forward.
Yeah, like you said, really quite small. Draganfly is a company of a little over $13 million market cap. As far as investors are concerned, it's a pretty small stock, pretty small company, but the potential for growth really is there. Analysts have a lot to say about the future of your stock specifically, but other drone stocks too are seeing a really positive trend right now of analysts expecting to see more and more investment here. So what you're saying definitely rings true with what we're seeing from analyst perspectives on these smaller companies as they continue to grow. Let's just talk a little bit more about which space Draganfly is in specifically. Which corner of the drone market are you seeing the most success in right now?
So Draganfly, as a matter of fact, produced the first drone that was actually ever credited with saving a human life. And that drone sits today in the Smithsonian on permanent display. It's quite a spectacular story of the search and rescue that happened. Our history and much of our mission comes from public safety, whether that's search and rescue or whether it's law enforcement. And one of the reasons that we have survived as a drone company in North America is that we were very focused on industries and customers that valued North American built drones. So the drone industry is completely dominated by the Chinese right now, and Chinese manufacturers. And they make a great product at an incredible price. They're heavily subsidized to do it, and it's worked out incredibly well for them and for their sovereign nation or nations. So public safety is very important to us, and that's where we're seeing a lot of traction for our equipment. That said, the industrial side of things is, on the inspection side and the security side, so perimeter security, facility security, things like that, we're also very strong in. We recently were just granted an FAA waiver to fly drones over people and moving vehicles in Boston, which is to my knowledge, we're the only ones that have it. And what we do there is we're actually flying missions. It's in pilot, and it's got a few progressions to go through, but with Boston Mass General. So to do their medical delivery. So to be able to fly between their main location and about 1,200 other satellite locations to deliver things like pharmaceuticals, test results, light equipment, even organs in some case, and things like that. So those, and that kind of still really fits into our public safety experience. So that, and then of course military. So we've been doing contract engineering for the military prime contractors for about 20 years, and now for about the past 4 we've been selling directly to militaries. And so in terms of what we see for the valuations of these companies, some of them have already started to see some pretty good valuation increase. A few others like us are lagging a bit. And I think overall in the market, what the market is waiting for, what the institutional analysts, we've had no problem raising the institutional money to fund the business, which is interesting. So there's very smart money behind the industry. And I'd like to think us as well, or maybe even in particular. But what I think the general public is waiting for is like who is getting the orders. So I think on announcement of a few of the larger orders that not just us, but a few of the other companies, I'm confident have and are very close to being able to be announceable. But I think us in particular, I think you're going to see a market appreciation that's spectacular. .com days spectacular valuation increases.
I think that's very exciting for retail investors to hear that you as a company are expecting a lot of those contracts to be announced soon. And I think that's an important timeline to understand for investors. How long do a lot of these contracts, we see the announcement made publicly that yes, the US, other countries are starting to invest more into drone dominance and really upping their technology for this. How long does it take from that investment to actual orders coming through, contracts getting made, and that showing up on your books?
5 years ago, convincing the military that drones were going to be more important than manned aircraft was a big lift. And, that shift has been made. That really happened about 3 years ago. And then it's taken another 2.5-ish years to get to the point where you get through selection. They've decided what their concept of operations are. what's going to be their roadmap in particular. And then they've got to go through a whole selection and testing and certification and audits and plant visits and clearing of personnel and stuff. And that's taken about 2.5 years. And so we're really at a spot right now where we're confident in the orders that, and we've tooled up, and, in order to meet the particular orders at hand. And so I think us and probably likely a few others are maybe even just months away from, announcing some numbers that are really going to be impactful.
That's a lot of exciting news on the horizon for your company, but what you're doing right now is already impressive in itself, especially with the team of people that you have working together on all of these different products you're developing right now.
For a small company, the advantage that we have is that we have a bench that's been around for 25 years. I mean, we've only ever had a couple of employees that have left, and one was retirement and another one was maternity. So, we have a core group of engineers that haven't worked on anything but drones their entire career, and there's not much that we haven't seen. So Draganfly has a lineup of drones, and if you look at any of the other very fine North American manufacturers out there, they have a drone that has a specific use, and it has certain iterations around it that can do a couple of different things. And what Draganfly brings to the table to our customers, and where we're finding, really strong traction, is the fact that we have a product suite. There's really only one, maybe two other companies in the world that have a product suite of drones that range from small FPVs, through to surveillance drones, through to utility drones, through to what we call heavy lift drones that can, carry up to a couple 100 pounds doing logistics. We have hybrid drones that both run on gas and electric, so they can have loiter times of up to 5 to 6 hours. And so I think that's what really differentiates Draganfly, is that we've got a larger capability than most of the folks maybe all the folks in North America. They have different capabilities, which we don't necessarily fit into as well. And I think that's a big differentiator for Draganfly, is just that amount of experience and what we can deliver with a small team. Now that team is scaling. We're very cautious not to overscale or pre-scale or rapidly scale. I've seen those disasters before as well. So we have a very cautious approach. I think the other thing that's important to note, that on our board, we have the former Secretary of Defense of the United States. We have the former Secretary of the Navy of the United States. We have the former, Chief of the Staff of the White House as our head advisor. Folks like this don't join small cap boards unless they know, unless they really know, So I think we're well positioned, and if there's any telltale signs, of hopefully where Draganfly is going to go, I think if you look at the quality of our product and the quality of our people, led by an incredible board of directors, I think it's hopefully indicative of what's going to unfold.
Really interesting company and conversation today. Cameron, thank you so much for sharing more with our viewers today about what to expect with investing in the drone industry and how much this sector could be taking off soon. Appreciate your time, Cameron.
We appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, we'd love to hear from you in the comments. Are you looking at any drone stocks right now, or this sector as a whole? Maybe there's some defense companies that interest you as well. Let us know what you are looking into in the comments and whether Draganfly might be going on your watch list. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks for joining us, everyone. And as always, happy investing.